And the effects were like within 15 minutes. Like I swear it onset very, very quickly. The one really interesting thing that happened is like I was more interested in everything that I do.
Nobody's safe. Nobody's safe. Soon as we step out the cage, we raising all of the stakes. Make no mistake, either you stay in your place or we putting you on a plate. Look at
What's up, everybody? It's Boy Ryan, and this is the Thunder Channel on nootropics, on testosterone, on male performance. Consider subscribing to the channel, hitting the bell to get notified of all our future content. As I said yesterday, yeah, look, I got a code for you if you want to try Torque. That's our nootropic stack, 6 to 8 hours of energy. Code is 15 now. It'll save you 15%. Also, as I mentioned yesterday, we just launched the Getting on TRT guide. I mean, if you want all of the information you need to understand to get on TRT in one central location, Getting on TRT. You can do that at livecortex.com. All right, friends. So let's talk about CMAX. Okay, this is a long-awaited or somewhat overdue, probably, and certainly largely requested breakdown of this peptide. The thing about CMAX is it has all kinds of properties. So I'm going to break down the neurological properties, the otherwise properties, how you should administer it, or how people administer it, because technically it's a research chemical. My experience with it and a host of other things, so stick around. All right, number one, CMAX is a synthetic derivative of ACTH. So ACTH, or adrenocorticotropic hormone, you pump out from your pituitary from a signal from the hypothalamus, which tells your adrenal glands to make cortisol. Reports say that it is on the list of essential vital drugs in Russia, specifically for its cognitive, neurocognitive protective effects, and in some cases like being able to treat things like ischemic brain injury. It has reactive oxygen species reducing properties. What I think one of the most powerful things that CMAX has the ability to do is stimulate BDNF. So brain-derived neurotrophic factor rises when you run. I mean, there's some nootropics that stimulate brain-derived neurotrophic factor, but largely what it does is help the survival of your brain cells, your existing neurons. So it'll aid in the survival of current neurons, but also encourage growth and differentiation of new neurons, as well as engage in the process of synaptogenesis, creating more synapses. So having BDNF stimulated by a nootropic chemical is a very useful thing for general brain maintenance and brain function. But importantly, I mean, this is the thing that people really want to know about CMAX, is it stimulates dopaminergic brain activity, but it does so in a very interesting way. By itself, so if you were to administer CMAX by itself, and we'll get to how it's typically dosed, you really wouldn't get a massive dopaminergic effect. You'd probably get a dopaminergic effect, which would be defined by extracellular dopamine levels that are higher than normal. But it's with the combination of other dopamine release agents where CMAX seems to be like really, really powerful in elevating the dopamine release that the other agent is inducing. Now, there's research on this. The study is using amphetamines, but I would wager that you could probably have a comparable effect with other dopamine release agents like CDP choline, acetyl L-carnitine, mecunopurines, and probably the best dopaminergic release agent as it relates to this would be bromontane. Basically, what the literature is telling us relating to CMAX and dopamine and other dopaminergic release agents in the mix is that when you have a dopamine release agent in the mix, in the case of amphetamines in this study, but presumably things like bromontane, you get a multifold increase in the dopamine concentrations in the extracellular space, bigger than the release that you would get, or the quantity of dopamine in that space, from just the dopamine release agent. So it's essentially potentiating dopamine release agents. Now, what extra, cellular dopamine means, or having more extracellular dopamine, it means there's basically more of the raw transmitter to bind to and activate receptors, which is ultimately what gets you the dopaminergic response. So there's a paper on this. It's titled CMAX, an ACTH analog with nootropic properties, activates dopaminergic and serotonergic brain systems in rodents, and in it they specify the following. They go, this peptide alone, so this is where the important distinction is, failed to alter the tissue of extracellular concentrations of dopamine and its metabolites. CMAX injected 20 minutes prior to D-amphetamine dramatically enhanced the effects of the latter on extracellular dopamine levels and on the locomotor activity of animals. The results reveal the positive modulatory effects of CMAX on the striatal serotonergic system and the ability of CMAX to enhance both striatal release of dopamine and locomotor behavior elicited by D-amphetamine. Again, what that's basically saying is that if you take CMAX by itself, though it may have a dopaminergic release properties or extracellular dopamine inducing properties, you're the best way to use it, and if you're really looking to get that kind of hardcore dopamine release effect, would be in combination with other dopaminergics that predominantly either make you synthesize more dopamine or release more dopamine. So in addition to increasing the expression of BDNF, which promotes the survival of existing neurons and encourages the growth of new neurons, I mean, this stuff encourages neurogenesis, essentially, as well as the creation of new synapses. It also gives you kind of more locally available dopamine to work with, which is really awesome. So yeah, there was some mention of serotonergic activity. Basically, the only thing that I could extract from the literature is you've got a higher concentration of one of the serotonin metabolites. It's 5-IAA. So what that implies is a faster cyclical recycled use of serotonin, resulting in just a more optimized serotonergic system for the time being that it's acutely affecting you. All right, dose range. The dose range in the typical suggestions is 300 micrograms to 1,000 micrograms, so 300 micrograms to a milligram. And, but my personal suggestion on dose range, or my observation on dose ranges is 150 micrograms to 1,000 micrograms. Usually dosed once a day, but there are anecdotals that suggest it's okay to be dosing it twice a day in experimental capacities. It doesn't have the best bioavailability, right? And most peptides typically don't. So you've either got to inject it subcutaneously or insulfated intranasally. And I think the literature on that is like it permeates the olfactory endothelium. That's like the blood vessel architecture in the area of your nose that's responsible for communicating with your brain and helping you to smell things. So in that permeation of that tissue then crosses into brain tissue and affects brain chemistry. Now, of the two administration routes, intranasal, which you can get, CMAX nasal spray, or a subcutaneous injection, my personal opinion on the matter was probably that you would have greater bioavailability with a subcutaneous injection. But either way, I mean, you'd more than likely have comparable bioavailability between intranasal administration and subcutaneous injection. I just think if you're looking for 99, 100%, if that's even possible with this compound, you'd want to shoot for subcutaneous injection. That means, for the record, that, it's a peptide, right? It comes in a small kind of block of powder. You would have to get bacteriostatic water, which aids to sort of sterilize the entire solution and make it a liquid so that it's injectable. You'd have to do the proper dose conversion wherever you end up getting CMAX, and however many the quantity of CMAX is in that vial corresponds to the amount of bacteriostatic water, which then allows you to calculate doses in the microgram quantity. So, you're going to have to do some math and some mental work to figure this out, and probably some research. All right, so let's talk about my experience on it. Yeah, look, I took it many, many years ago. I really don't remember how it affected me. That's why I kind of wanted to bring it back in and refresh my understanding of the mechanisms, as well as how it acutely affects me. And when I did this was last week. I brought CMAX in, had it for a while actually, and started injecting it. I removed all other nootropics for like 3 days because I didn't want anything else in there messing with my ability to sort of internally identify what was changed or better or worse. So I was dosing 400 micrograms of it subcutaneously with an insulin needle right into my belly fat. And the effects were like within 15 minutes. Like I swear it onset very, very quickly. The one really interesting thing that happened is like I was more interested in everything that I do. On a daily basis, I'm doing work for Cortex Labs, content, research, consulting work. I take a break every now and then and game. I like to play Battlefield and Warzone and a host of other things. And in those instances, I was just much more interested in what I was doing. Everything just seemed cooler, which I find cool. I didn't notice anything particularly stimulating. I did not notice any memory benefits from it. The other thing that I recognize is that, and this is going to sound bizarre, but like it was easy for me to picture stuff in my head. I'm a very visual thinker. So when I'm thinking about scientific stuff, I'm picturing what I have learned from anatomy classes. Like my brain is very visual, and it was easier for me to picture things. Mechanistically, because I think this is really interesting, and like to me that's the best effect. It was easier for me to picture stuff in my head, which I really, really love. It makes me think better. The only plausible explanation for this is the activation of the default mode network, and it just so turns out that CMAX has the ability to activate the default mode network. It's a system of activation of brain regions ranging from the medial prefrontal cortex to the angular gyrus to the posterior cingulate cortex. Just all these brain regions are activated and communicating with one another. And that was essentially it. I mean, I probably had that effect for 3 to 4 hours. I didn't really notice it after that. I dosed it 2 to 3 times after that and pretty much got the same effect, which is really interesting. I didn't seem to have a tolerance with it. We don't have a lot of studies on safety. It's not approved by the FDA. So what you're going to find on some of the websites that sell it are, have the usual disclaimer, like this is a research chemical, not for human consumption, only to be executed in a research capacity, under the guidance of a qualified medical physician. Overall, since peptides have become like much more popular these days than when I got into biohacking and nootropics, which was, 2007, 2008 timeframe, like it's a very, very popular compound, right? And it's cool to understand what it does and to fuss around with it if you're going to experiment with it. Honestly liked it, bringing it back in the mix. I was like, wow, this is noticeable and interesting, and peptides interest me, right? I had this video where I explained PT141, which I somewhat recently dosed, and I have some more information for you guys, which I'll do somewhat soon. But yeah, peptides are very interesting. I mean, they're kind of cutting edge. They're very prevalent and prominent these days, and they're being discussed by biohackers and used by people all around the world. All right, appreciate you guys being with me. As I said in the beginning, yeah, Torque Stack. Look, if you want motivation, mental energy, verbal fluency, but also stimulation, I mean, Torque is like, if you don't want to have to rely on energy drinks or other nootropics that are marginally working, just take Torque, because it'll be very noticeable within 25 minutes after you administer it. You can save, the coupon code right now is 15 now. You can save 15% if you're trying to get a bottle of Torque or try for the first time. Go get a bottle, use the coupon code 15 now. Cortex is an entirely different animal. Somebody recently reached out to me, was like, what of your two stacks is best for salespeople? And the answer is hands down Cortex, because the verbal fluency induction that it has the ability to execute in some people is very, very powerful. But also, it's dopamine stimulating too, so you'll have that kind of energy to want to tackle stuff. Maybe clean your house, maybe work on your company, maybe do something productive. If you need to hire me to look at your blood work and figure out what you need to do to get on TRT, modify your protocol, to formulate nootropic regimens that are targeted for your brain and your productivity that you want to get, you can do that at livecortex.com. And we recently just launched the email consults, which I'm getting like 10 a day, because people find it easier, instead of getting on a call, to just synthesize their issues, maybe throw in some blood work into an email and have me respond with targeted protocols. You can book any of those options at livecortex.com. All right, pleasure being with you guys. So much more content to come soon. Tomorrow there will be a live stream at 10 a.m. Eastern time on YouTube, so look for the thumbnail to get notified. Make sure you have notifications on your subscription of this channel. And it's been epic hanging out with you, and I'll talk to you on the next one.